Looking ahead, what's coming up? Of course, the midterm exam on October 11th is, we want to prepare for that. So on Tuesday, October 9th, we're going to have a review. Thank you. And I'm going to start a review today as well, just because the streaming, it's really useful if people streaming get to see stuff maybe a couple of times. So on October 11th, we all have to come in to write the exam here. So everyone should know that. We are also hoping that some people will turn in the research paper. So October 9th would be the deadline for that. The deadline's passed, but I mean, that would be, you'd no longer have the option of submitting the paper after October 9th, which would not be good. If you want to talk to me one-on-one about the paper, my office, ArtX 170, my office hours, 11 a.m. to noon, Tuesdays and Thursdays, that is right after class. So that would be a great opportunity to talk to me about your topic. Remember, there are 4 assigned topics. You pick one, so I can help you get started, get it finished, figure out how to write it. So, but you do have to come and see me, or maybe let me know what's going on. So you'd want to get that in by Tuesday, for it's still to count, right? Okay. Next up, we've been working on the chapter on mobile. So last class we looked over some of the early phases of mobile communication technology. We talked about a lot of protocols and such. So let's just take a look, quick review. One of the early precursors to the smartphones that we know now were personal digital assistants, right? The Newton. We looked over a strange advertisement from the 1990s where nobody knew about Bluetooth, nobody knew really about email, at least not in that advertisement. So it was a kind of an alternative history. There's this giant thing that does a lot of what smartphones do without a lot of the convenience. So the Newton personal digital assistant was a pretty ahead of its time type of device, which is why it flopped. But eventually the technology caught up, and much of what was in the Newton we have nowadays, which is cool. And in our phones and also our tablets doing that. So yeah, another important change we talked about, but apps. So apps are pretty specific to the mobile operating systems. Prior to that, I mean, of course, there were programs, we called them, on computers and such. But the idea that we would all, have a collection of smaller apps that, is quite fluid. We delete them, we pick them up. It's a different approach to the early idea of kind of a Microsoft monopoly, where they'd give us the operating system, they'd write all the programs that we needed, and so on and so forth. Instead, we got a very diversified landscape of apps. Just a question. What's your most prized app? What's the app on your phone that you use the most, that you couldn't live without? Sorry? I can't hear. Neither can the microphones. What's your most Spotify? Okay, Spotify. So, for those who are into the music, what else? Is that a big one, Michael?
I've been using Snapchat lately.
Snapchat a lot. Okay, so we got more of a social, and we've got a week about social media as well. That we'll be learning a lot from you then. Snapchat, Michael, are you using it for like the messaging function, or are you doing anything like getting news through it, or any?
Oh, I'm just using it to chat with my cousins.
Chat, yeah. Okay. So like kind of primary use. Others must-have apps.
My family keeps in touch largely with Marco Polo.
Marco Polo, your favorite app? Never even heard of it. Okay, interesting. Others? must-have apps. Anyone use an app for, I don't know, weather, that kind of thing? Yeah, weather pretty often, flight status, dining, and more. Go to a festival, and now there's an app for the festival. It's like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. So, and of course, there's a lot of jobs and action in that little area versus you no longer have to go to work for Microsoft to work on a useful piece of software that a lot of people use. You can, you know, work in a startup that really it's just producing a single app or a suite of apps. So it's a big change, and if you look, it's one of the ways that people looking into electronic media have kind of evaluated basically the marketplace is just to think that, well, it's a danger when there's too much concentration in one company in one area, which of course we see happening more and more in electronic media. We just talked last class about Comcast going ahead and buying Sky TV, which is a European and Asian satellite distributor. So it's just another sign of the incredible consolidation of companies buying other companies, to basically now compete in a global marketplace. So you get people getting uncomfortable when one company owns too much, and one could look at this development, where small companies can produce apps as a positive because it's more diversification.
With that problem that you're talking about, how do they get around monopoly laws when they do end up owning a large portion of the market?
Yeah, it's a good question. Every big merger like Comcast, NBC, or they always are let's say there's an evaluation period where the FTC does raise the question that you raised. And sometimes they have to make kind of explicit promises, that we're not going to compete in this area, or sometimes they have to, for instance, close down a part of the company that is being merged just so that they don't have too much of a monopoly position. There's companies like Facebook always operate with, the fear that someone's going to say, well, you've got too much of a market share. The U.S. is being, predictably pretty hands-off, but Europe is more interventionist, right? And so, like the new privacy rules that hit social media a few months ago, they were basically formulated by Germany, but since the internet is, global, then all of our American, apps still have to obey that law. So, but yeah, it's a good question. And another thing that we're maybe, once again, you have to spend a lot of time looking into each individual case, but another thing that it is, the FTC is mostly concerned about a kind of horizontal competition. So, if we're looking at, for instance, competition within movie distribution, they're going to look at the different companies that, distribute movies into movie theaters or whatever. They don't want one company buying all of them. But if one company buys, a studio that produces movies as well as a distribution chain, as well as, an artist's agency or something like that. So they're much less concerned about a vertical integration than a horizontal integration. Because when they look at it, they still say, well, there's going to be different talent agencies that compete. There's going to be different movie studios or production studios that compete. So that's okay if, if one company does a vertical kind of integration, they're much more concerned about this. So that's something that, when you hear that two huge companies are merging and it's going through, you figure, oh, okay, they're not doing anything, but maybe they're also just looking at it in this way, So if AT&T bought Verizon and T-Mobile, that would be a big problem, But if AT&T buys, content for to distribute through their network, that's less of a problem. So that's another idea about what they're watching for. And then there's huge parts of the political landscape that think that any kind of oversight is bad, right? They just figure, that's the blanket ideology. Is like, no, just let the market work it out. If people are not happy with, the one cell phone provider, then there will be others that will start up, and then people can. But that ignores that it's very hard to start up from nothing. So, anyway, cool. We looked at, the basis of both data and voice communication over the mobile systems is packet switching, just like it is to the internet. So we saw that that's the most efficient way of putting data through the network. Is basically, if you imagine people talking over the phone, there's a lot of silence, there's a lot of downtime, and early cell phone systems could not take advantage of packet switching. They would have to have like an open communication line the whole time. So even if you weren't saying anything, that silence would still be transferred over the network. With something like packet switching, you can break everything up, and in those moments of silence, you can just drop that data. There's no reason to put that, and instead you can fill your digital pipeline full of packets from other people's conversations. So instead of just having a single line open on a conversation, you can now put tens or hundreds of conversations into the same line, all compressed and packeted out, so that if for some reason everybody's talking at the same time, network slows a little bit as all those packets go through. If there's a lapse and people are silent, sort of an average amount, then all those packets get shoved in much more efficiently and communicated that way. And then as well, you can put now packets of conversation or packets of data, text, whatever you want, can all run through the same pipeline. And so you can pack it even more tightly. Little text messages take nothing compared to all the data, that a video stream, Netflix on your phone would take. And so that can also be packaged very conveniently in the same kind of pipeline. So that's part of the advantage of digitization just in general, is that you can, as long as you have, like a phone line going into a car, you can put audio through it, you can put video through it, you can put data, voice, text, and communications, right? Versus before, you had to have a radio in the car of the right type of radio. Sirius XM had to get you to have a satellite radio in your car. Now it doesn't matter, Or from a business perspective, you could be, a telephone company, but you can start delivering your original video content if you want. It doesn't matter anymore. So all these businesses have converged, and technically, the packet switching system of the internet makes a lot of that possible. Okay. So yeah, we looked over other stuff. You guys should know what OTT is by now. I'm sure you do, right? Over the top. Thank you, Chow. Exactly. Right. So, over the top as being a whole new access point to, your home entertainment, to your television or whatever. Over the top means that the internet plugs directly into your TV and competes with cable. And in fact, what we've been seeing is, more and more people just not subscribing to cable anymore. So that's a big development. And so some of the OTT providers that you certainly have heard about, Netflix, YouTube, Amazon, and then HBO, for instance, with their over-the-top app. Anybody get that? HBO Now? Doubt it, right? HBO is maybe not the content that that you guys as an audience are willing to pay, $8 or $10 for, I think, right? But in terms of, just in terms of the way the industry used to work, the cable companies would have to be the distributor for HBO. You could never go get HBO content any other way except, you know, if it was licensed and put out as DVDs or something. No one gets that anymore. But I think the idea was those premium cable services like HBO would be selling points for a cable company. And they'd say, well, would you like HBO? Or, you know, sign up for a year and we'll give you a year of HBO for free or something like that. And that fell apart a couple of years ago when HBO decided, okay, well, we're gonna put out an app so that, you know, you don't have to be with Comcast anymore to get HBO. So, you know, that's a reasonably big change. And now HBO, part of the companies that were bought by AT&T. So that's a change too. HBO is now going to be putting out a lot more content because AT&T wants to compete with Netflix.
Did you say HBO was bought by AT&T?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yep. I mean, it was part of a huge deal. Yeah. So, yes, all these companies are buying each other. It's crazy. All right. So, well, I mean, we're jumping from, you know, I think it's a function of, because we're talking about phones and what's, you know, driving change about content and programming on phones, we wind up jumping around all over the place. It's talking about phone technology, talking about, you know, the content you know, that goes to phones, the apps and stuff. So it's a little all over the place. So more stuff. You know, your phone now communicates with other objects, right? Your Apple Watch. And so the standard for that communication between your phone and those objects is SPOT, Smart Personal Object Technology. And so this is an area where things are, you know, developing fast, and Apple obviously is the most prominent example with the watch. And of course, then there's other companies that are, you know, producing the same type of thing. But what you want, if you're going into this business, is to know that, you know, you're designing for a set of standards that are not going to go away, right? You don't want to, you know, come up with a great design for a watch and then find out that, you know, it won't work with any of the iOS or Android devices, and then you're dead, right? I mean, you've wasted all your time. So that's why it's important that standards get set, and yet it's always, you know, who's going to set those standards? It's often a big manufacturer like Apple, because they've got the business wrapped up, kind of. So Spot is, you know, mostly Apple, but partly others are trying to contribute to that standard, and the reason they're doing it is to make sure that everyone's working with a standard that, you know, eventually will persist, and those devices will be useful, right? I mean, think of what happened with radio when the famous Howard Armstrong, right, creates FM radio from scratch, basically, the best radio system out there, designs, you know, transmission towers and et cetera, and then eventually the standard gets shifted, and everything that he's done, millions of dollars that he's invested, useless, right? FM radio is still a good technology, but the standard was changed and useless. So it's a good lesson of how important these things are and how touchy it is. So it's still on the topic of, you know, kind of satellite devices, things that are, you know, that link up with cell phones and stuff, or Google Glass. So Google Glass as, you know, another way of integrating screen technology and camera and stuff all in one, you know, again, fancy consumer object. That seems to be a part of this. It's like the Apple Watch has to be really seductive. Google Glass had to be really seductive. But it didn't work really well. Not yet, anyway. And so it's largely just used in industry. So it was not a success. It didn't catch on with everybody. So, you know, that's another one of those kind of satellite devices which are important. And then down here, I've kind of flagged things in red just for myself that we really need to talk about. you know, another huge area of development, the Internet of Things. So, you know, networked everyday devices that communicate with each other. This is a real thing of the future. So I dug out a video on that. This is kind of where we left off last class. So this has a good explanation of the technical challenges.
The Internet of Things is changing much about the world we live in, from the way we drive to how we make purchases, and even how we get energy for our homes. Sophisticated sensors and chips are embedded in the physical things that surround us, each transmitting valuable data that lets us better understand how these things work and work together. But how exactly do all these devices share such large quantities of data? And how do we put that information to work? Whether we're improving the production of a factory, giving city residents real-time updates on where to park, or monitoring our personal health, it's the common Internet of Things platform that brings this diverse information together and provides the common language for the devices and apps to communicate with each other. The process starts with the devices themselves, which securely communicate with an Internet of Things platform. This platform integrates the data from many devices and applies analytics to share the most valuable data with applications that address industry-specific needs. Let's start with a simple example, a car. After taking a long road trip, Rebecca notices that her check engine light has come on. She knows that she needs to have her car looked at by a mechanic, but is not sure whether it's something minor or something that needs immediate attention. As it turns out, the sensor that triggered Rebecca's check engine light monitors the pressure in her brake line. This sensor is one of many monitoring processes throughout the car, which are constantly communicating with each other. A component in the car called the diagnostic bus gathers the data from all these sensors, then passes it to a gateway in the car. The gateway integrates and sorts the data from the sensors. This way, only the most relevant diagnostic information will be transmitted to the manufacturer's platform. But before sending this organized data, the car's gateway and platform must first register with each other and confirm a secure communication. The platform is constantly gathering and storing thousands of bits of information from Rebecca's car and hundreds of thousands of cars like hers, building an historical record in a secure database. The manufacturer has added rules and logic to the platform. So when Rebecca's car sends a signal that her brake fluid has dropped below a recommended level, the platform triggers an alert in her car. The manufacturer also uses the platform to create and manage applications that solve specific issues. In this case, the manufacturer can deploy an application on the platform called the Asset Management System. This application oversees all of their customers' cars on the road, as well as all the parts in their warehouses. It uses the data from Rebecca's car to offer her a potential appointment time to service her car, directions to the nearest certified dealer, and a coupon for the service. What's more, the app will ensure that Rebecca's brakes are covered under her warranty, that the correct replacement part is ordered and then sent to the dealership so it is ready when she arrives. But the manufacturer's analysis does not stop there. They have also deployed a continuous engineering application that tracks not only Rebecca's car, but hundreds of thousands of others, looking for ways to improve the design and manufacturing process of the car itself. If the same problem in her brake line crops up in a critical number of other cars, the manufacturer uses applications custom built for the automobile industry to pinpoint the exact problem. They can see if these cars were made at the same factory, used the same parts, or came off the assembly line on the same day. So what do all these pieces add up to? Streamlined inventory management for the dealer, a better, safer car from the manufacturer. And for Rebecca, it means she can be back on the road faster and get to where she's going safely. All thanks to the Internet of Things.
Okay, cool. So that takes a very, recognizable issue and talks about what the Internet of Things is doing with it. What do you think about the culture that is presenting to us?
Personally, it's really scary.
Yeah, me too. Could you elaborate?
I don't know, it feels extremely invasive. It feels like somebody's always watching something that I'm doing, whether it's like an actual image like staring at me, or if just the fact that I'm being monitored is like feels intrusive. And yeah, like I understand the sense of efficiency that it's generating, but I don't want all those trackers.
Right.
Yeah.
Tracking every little thing you're using and doing.
Yeah, like just like the in the video her plotting out like how the engine light sends a direct message to the manufacturer, and then the manufacturer is then able to curtail stuff directly to my phone specifically for that. Like that's, I don't know, that's really intense. Like I don't want like my car manufacturer to know all that about me in the car.
Yeah, absolutely. Surveillance. Who does?
I do.
Ibu, yes.
To know how their car's working and how it's not working.
Uh-huh.
To make it better. And as far as surveillance, it's out there. It's not going away, and there's nothing that we can do about it. So if it's possible, which it is possible, I would like all of the information that's being collected to be for my benefit. Since it's being collected anyway, I might as well reap the benefits.
Yeah, I think that's their they. I mean, that's ideally how it would work out. Would be that it all turns out to be for our benefit. Okay, so we've got personal attitudes towards surveillance. It can be scary or not. Let's see what else was in there that was. I mean, the general architecture laid out there, the idea that each device would be equipped with, it would monitor itself, and then it would be equipped with enough, intelligence, quote unquote, to, sort through the data it's creating. So that's number one. So, I mean, I often think, again, of getting your fridge stocked at home as another sort of application in the Internet of Things. So you've got, every food item is going to have to be tagged somehow, and probably not optically, but rather everything's going to have some kind of electromagnetic signature in the packaging. When you put it in the fridge will know what's in the packaging. It'll know how old that is, so it'll protect you against drinking old and bad milk. So there will be, some benefit to you, but it will also, I think my other fear, and I share William's fear for surveillance a little bit, but my other fear is that I'm getting enmeshed in a web of like provision, let's call it that. I'm just getting enmeshed in a web where it's going to be harder for me to like go buy, a candy bar from, from some country which doesn't tag anything, It's kind of like I'm getting enmeshed in this whole system where everything that I need is a part of that system. And anything that can enter that system has to be, all part of some standard or some protocol. And I feel that cuts off my autonomy, So,
Yeah, when do you start making decisions when Amazon mails your groceries to you?
Exactly, and it's sort of easier, of course, to sit back and say, okay, put me on the subscription, and you will notify me if you think that I should get coffee like once more per month or not, or something like that, And so, yeah. Pardon me?
It's still something you're authorized.
Well, but we know that from the Facebook users that the systems for authorization can be so exhausting to deal with that you eventually sign off, click the one box instead of clicking through the 400 box options that actually, are the real decision points in, the provision cycle. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like.
And then how long before your option to opt out isn't available anymore?
Yeah.
To where you need to be a part of this system in order to function as a human being in our society.
Yeah.
That's a very, very high expectation for a world that's supposed to be free.
Yeah. Does that connect with anybody else? Like, for instance, I'm trying to think myself. I've had the general feeling you're just talking about. I can't quite remember what it was, but have you wanted to turn your back on a technology and just realized, hey, I can't do that anymore because I just can't. kind of feel that way about social media. Like
Yeah.
I've basically stopped, but you know, like you guys is like, or your age group, not you as individuals, but your age group, you know, it's such a common thing. It's being integrated into your social life, right? A old guy like me, it's easy enough to say, I'm not going to go on Facebook anymore, you know, whatever. And I'm going to miss, you know, news about a high school reunion I didn't want to go to anyway. Have you guys felt like kind of like, okay, there's too much of a price to pay as much as I would like to get away from one technology or another?
Yeah, 100%. I can't work without social media now. I need to have an Instagram. I need to have a Twitter. I need to have a social presence in order to secure jobs. It's a way of connecting. It's a way of like making relationships. Like without having that presence, I don't have something to stand on when applying for jobs.
Understood. Yeah, you need to have a presence in that. And do other people feel that way? I mean, and yet, I mean, did you want to?
Yeah. Social media can be like a real source of anxiety, but also it's kind of necessary to, like William, is that your name?
Yeah.
Like William said, in order, a lot of jobs you do need to have that these days to even be considered,
Yeah.
which is just crazy.
Yeah. It's so the price that you have to pay to get out of the system is high in some ways. We were just looking at an Internet of Things video, which was, you know, singing the praises of a kind of an integrated data system where your car has a little problem in it, and the car has a computer in it which will surface a notification that this is a problem. But in the Internet of Things, it will also communicate that to, you know, a larger system outside your car, which can book an appointment for you, order the part that's going to be needed at the appointment, and, you know, and then communicate to the car manufacturer, oh, here's another guy who's got a bad brake line. Maybe you guys should redesign that, you know. And Ibu was saying, well, I want that. That's really efficient. My car is going to work better. It's going to be easier for me. And William is sort of expressing more doubts about that whole, you know, setup. As, you know, one concern we've talked about is surveillance, and the other one we've just been exploring is, you know, the idea of agency, which really means you have control over things in your life. And some people feel that, you know, a technological system like that binds us into such a complex thing that we lose agency eventually. Or if we want to capture it for ourselves, you know, then we've got to like leave the system. And, you know, that almost reminds me of kind of scientific dystopia, which is always a clear sign that we're not thinking clearly. It's way more complex than all of that. But, you know, kind of like a Blade Runner future where, you know, it's like you got to go completely off the grid, you know. And I mean, the grid is even a concept which is being talked about in business, you know. But the same. So do other people feel that any other reactions to the Internet of Things? I mean, apart from the probability that, you know, in the next 10 years, there will be jobs in this, there will be, you know, certainly on the design end, but on the marketing end, on the, you know, on trying to convince people that you really do need to have your home wired with a system that will turn the lights on and off for you automatically, and, you know. William?
Not to keep talking, but it concerns me about this.
You're our Pollyanna today.
Yeah, is the diversity of products. What does the market look like when all of this information is being gathered and these companies want to make the best decision so that they can sell it to the widest audience? Well, where does craftsmanship work into that? Where does I want something truly unique, or I want this product to do this very specific job for me that doesn't fit into the traditional market? Mm-hmm. Where do I find those products when the standard has been set in stone?
Yeah. That's a really good question. It sounds like there's going to be opportunities for really niche super expensive, high-end sort of custom products. You know what I mean? Because it's true, the standard, if everything is working on some kind of standard for, you know, in terms of communication or whatever, the truly unique stuff gains more value, right? I mean, again, we've seen that with, you know, just over the last, this is a feature of modern life, right? Modernity, the mass production of goods, it makes, you know, all of us can get toasters, you know, they hardly cost anything, but something that's handmade, like, I don't know, a Persian rug or something that takes hundreds of hours of manual labor becomes extraordinarily expensive and collectible, you know. That's a feature of modernity, of the modern world. So it's interesting, the notion that, you know, so much more of our, you know, of the object world around us, of the material things we have to use, could start obeying this type of logic, simply to be a part of, you know, some integrated Internet of Things or whatever. Even if it's just, you know, you've got to have an electronic barcode on every item, otherwise it won't be provisioned to you automatically on the, you know, the drone dump that comes in front of your door every 2-3 days. God, you mean I have to go out and will there be any stores left to go and find something in? It's like, wow, these will be huge changes, you know, but we don't know exactly how it'll shake out. So, hey, well, we actually came upon those surveillance issues ourselves. Have you, in our current day and age, with, you know, have you had the experience of feeling like, oh, I didn't realize I was buying something because or I was starting to use something because it gave me what I wanted, an advantage or whatever, and then found that along with that came something that tied you into surveillance or something that you didn't count on, that you weren't expecting. So in other words, that your first impulse was, hey, I need this in order for this. And then you get it and you realize, oh, I'm getting this, but I'm also getting all this other stuff. Something like that. Okay, okay. Yes?
Well, I downloaded Google Maps instead of Apple, like the Apple Maps on my phone, because the Apple Maps is just terrible. Mm-hmm. And the advantage you get with Google Maps is that you get better navigation, better all of that. The disadvantage is that they literally say in the app description, like, we will be locating you as part of our survey of just like looking at what people do.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Apple Maps doesn't do that. So I guess that could be an example.
Yeah, it was, you know what? It was actually the example that I was thinking of in my own experience that I haven't even
Really?
I didn't want to talk about. Yeah, I mean, it's like, well, you know, again, naive as I am, or just, I didn't even realize that, you know, when you're on the map and you hit an area that is colored red or colored orange, that's because everybody else's phone that's on the system is sending up data, and you know, the map, whatever, the map analysis or whatever is saying, oh, they're actually moving slow. So it will show you on the map that, hey, traffic is slow. I didn't even realize that that is actual real-time information gathered just the way that you're talking about. I kind of thought, oh, well, you know, when the Google car drove through there, it had to slow down. And so they figure it's usually, no, that's not the truth. It's like ongoing. So that was exactly, you know, I don't see a downside to that except the knowledge that, you know, wherever I am, they actually know sort of where I am. And they're not looking at me as an individual, so I'm not so concerned about surveillance there. But in order for this thing to work, we are all being tracked. You know? So that's a good point. Your Gmail, I mean, you may, you know, you're going, Google seems to be a big villain in this story today at this point, but everyone else is doing it too. So, you know, your Gmail is being parsed for keywords and stuff, which is creating, you know, a picture of you and your interests, which are then, you know, sorting you into types, and those types are relevant to determine what kind of advertising reaches your web page or your phone or whatever, right? you know, I think everyone's probably felt the odd sense of, you know, what would you call it? It's a bit of a surprise when you were maybe looking for something on a computer at school, or you weren't even aware that you were kind of logged in somewhere to something, which was, and then, you know, later on you start getting ads or something for whatever it was you were searching for, you know, and that could be coming out of your Gmail as well. So you think you're getting free email, but you're also getting, you know, these kinds of ad profiles developed about you. And they're really hard to avoid, right? And Amazon as well. It's, again, that's the integrated platform where they track so much about you and sell stuff to you. So similar issues seem to be coming up, which is great. You can reduce it to a bullet point. People worried about privacy and surveillance, but you know, it's looking ahead. It's going to be a huge area of concern and stuff. So corporate changes. Whoa, we talked about that. Lifestyle. That's a little bit better. Photographs and videos as recordings of events. So how do you feel about that? Like when I go to the pool with my kids, it says, you know, don't use your cell phone in here, and then everyone's there, but as long as we're not picking it up and taking pictures, it's okay. I mean, are there new kind of social accommodations being made around that aspect of it? What, are there moments when, for instance, the ability to take a picture or a video on your phone is more than just like a personal choice, but is actually society has to accommodate to it? So I just gave you one, which is like, you know, certain areas supposed to be off limits for taking pictures or videos. Yeah?
I know like at zoos, like certain animals, you can't take pictures of them.
Okay, interesting, right? How about, you know, if you're a cop and you're involved in some kind of police work, and now everybody around you is like, you know, right? That's a huge social change too, the ability to kind of document things happening on the street. I mean, we've seen that in the last 10 years, and you wouldn't have seen that before. But that now the public has a tool to, you know, to monitor, and so that's pretty important, I think. You know, as is the, you know, the ability to live stream events and stuff like that, right? So there's.
Everything we authorize in the privacy settings of so many applications gives access to your cameras, whether you're actively using them or not.
Oh, that's
You
interesting.
still have access to it.
Why do you think they would want to have access to your camera?
Because they're boundary pushers and they want access to it.
Right. I mean, I could see the location. I could see like sometimes it seems really ludicrous. Like why does this I don't know, calculator app want to also have my permission to track my location all the time? It's like that's kind of ludicrous. I'm just wondering what but I know because they want to geolocate and share that data with others. But the camera is interesting, right? Do you think that would mean that, like, when you're shooting stuff on your phone, that the app could have access to it?
Absolutely.
Well, like, that Apple pictures, like it sorts them by faces now. Like you can scan your pictures.
Well, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that.
That's weird.
Right. And that's probably another. Yeah, that is true, right? And so if you store your stuff in the cloud, which is apparently a convenience because it doesn't fill up your phone with data and you have a backup, but also now there's a good. And as we've seen with all those celebrity phone leaks, right? That if it's not secure, there's an issue. Interesting. But also they could be tracking like who your acquaintances are. Oh my God, yes, facial recognition, another thing, right? You could be walking around and there's the anonymity of public life, which again, another feature of modernity, right? I mean, prior to like the changes that, when I talk about modernity, and I don't, it's not a real part of our course topic. I should really be sticking, but around 1850 or something is, give or take a generation. you get all these changes. We looked at it from a technological sense, where you've got the telegraph and then the telephone and then all the electronic mass media, and now, you know, the personalized, you know, post-mass media that we've got. But in historical terms, in addition to those technological changes, you have urbanization, you have people coming off of farms and moving into the city. The cities get bigger. The economies of cities become way more important than the economies of, you know, the rest of the country outside. And you've got changes in city life, right? Which is before 1850, you probably lived in a small community where everybody knew you. They knew your parents and your family. And moving from one community to another was, you know, that you were known, you were the stranger, you were different, right? A sociologist named Simmel wrote about this. But when people start clustering into big cities, then there's a kind of an anonymity all the time, you know, and that can be emotionally difficult. You can be just, you know, a face in the crowd, right? No one knows you anymore. But it can also be a benefit to you. You're anonymous. No one knows who you are. You can reinvent yourself. You know, you're not tied down to what your grandfather did. You can become something completely different, you know. And yet, you know, if we can now pick the face out of the crowd and know exactly the social security number and the, you know, lifestyle choices of that face, that encroaches on that anonymity, which was a feature of modern life, you know. So big changes, whatever, big changes. So in this Internet of Things, standards are also all being worked out. And so machine-to-machine communication is obviously the big deal. That's what we saw in the IBM video, you know, how important it is that, you know, the computer in your car has, it's being worked out how that computer is going to shake hands with, you know, the other machines up in the cloud that basically are taking all this data and routing it to the manufacturer, to the garage, to the part sourcer. That's going to make a difference. And so M2M is, you know, the blanket term for all of these technologies, just the way like 4G and 5G, the kind of blanket term for all of those cell technologies. You know, it's just one name for all of it. So M2M, those are the smart devices. And we've seen, you know, just in our conversation here, some of us feel the convenience outweighs the security concerns. Others, it's, you know, a different, others are more concerned about security. So the grid, linkage of servers into single system, dividing complex computer tasks among machines. Oh my God. So all of that. I don't know, we shouldn't. Do we need final thoughts on this? I don't think we do. So that was the very eclectic content of that chapter, you know, which is leading us out of just radio and television and what they became on the internet, and then how they've changed again now that they're coming to us through mobile technology. It's just, you know, we're just in this interconnected world.
What is CERN?
Pardon me?
Is that an acronym?
M2M?
CERN?
CERN is a big physics research lab in Europe. That's actually where the World Wide Web was kind of born. You know, Tim Berners-Lee was actually working at CERN, and they needed a way of sharing their documents and data and stuff, and so he created a computer with HTML and they started using it there, and that's what became the web. But CERN itself is, you know, is a particle. You know, they're scientifically they're trying to figure out what are the smallest particles that make up the world, and so it's got a huge particle collider in there that, like, is this giant building, and they shoot atoms at each other and try to make them split and then figure out what's going on there. So all of that type of research requires. You know, they used to have a supercomputer in a room or whatever. In fact, if I went with my kids a couple of months ago to the Museum of Computing I think it's in Mountain View. It's really fascinating. I would recommend it to anybody. They have, whether or not you're interested in geeky computer stuff or something, the displays and the educational aspect, fantastic. Anyway, they've got some of the early supercomputers there, or parts of them, and so nowadays it's more distributed, so that many individual computers can work together to do really complex calculations, and that's how it pertains to this idea of the grid, that computing power doesn't have to now be in a single box. It can be distributed everywhere. Has anyone heard of those? There's a couple of internet-based projects where you can sign on, and when your computer is not being used, it will be doing calculations along with every other computer that's signed into this project. In other words, the idea that your computer may not be a supercomputer, but if everybody volunteers their individual computers, the app can make them all work together to do like very complicated calculations of work. So I don't know the actual title of it, but we could look it up, or you could look it up. It's pretty cool. The idea is you've got all of this stuff, it's turned on, and it's just doing nothing, right? Why couldn't we make it work all at once? Just the way old cell phones, they were turned on and communicating silence. That was wasteful. If we split everything into packets and distribute it, then it's really efficient. So at that point, I buy into the efficiency argument for sure. Well, okay, let's look at, because we've got the exam coming up next week, and we're going to be reviewing for the exam on Tuesday, and on Thursday, everybody has to be here to write the exam. And so in the modules, there is the exam review, right? So we'll go over this in detail and actually answer questions and such and pose questions next week. But so the midterm has 40 questions. They're all either true, false, or multiple choice. They're on chapters 1 through 6 of the textbook, so that's everything we studied up till now. Remember, we did a quiz sort of halfway through on chapters 1 through 3. So some of the questions will be taken from the questions that were on the quiz. And also, I've been giving you Kahoots, and we'll do another one at the end of this class coming up soon. So remember, Kahoots are those little kind of multiple choice quizzes we do in the midst of class here. And they have something called a challenge. So you have to have a smartphone for this. It doesn't work on a laptop. But basically, if you go to the Kahoot app on your phone and then enter the PIN, you can play these same Kahoots that we'll do in class. You can, and have done. You can play them at home too as kind of practice as well. So that's a really good way of preparing for the exam. And then we'll have some additional stuff on Tuesday. But I wanted to give you these so that if you want to start studying over the weekend, then you can use these to review a lot of the important content that we've covered. Okay, so there's the news on that, and let's just let's do the chapter 6 and see. It's really convenient for me as well, because if I forget something that's important, the Kahoot will remind me of it. So I think every time we play these, it's like I say, oh, I didn't tell you about that one. So there you go. So we were on chapter 6. So for the purposes of review, you would get the PIN number off of our website. So those will be, the ones that are on the website are open until next Thursday, 9 a.m. So if this doesn't work for you, you should contact me. Either see me in office hours or email me. Just say, maybe I don't have a smartphone, or whatever. I can't use your review method, and we'll try to work out something else. All right, 10 questions. Does internet telephone use packet switching technology? Yes or no? Okay, so the answer was yes, it is all packets switched. So I'm kind of surprised that we didn't all know that, right? So this is really the basis of anything after 3G cell phone technology is using the same basic architecture as the rest of the internet, which is packet switching. Any kind of data is broken into small packets that are sent the most efficient way through the network. If we're talking about the internet, packets of data which make up your web page may take very different routes depending on what the fastest way through the network is. So your web page may be composed of data that's coming from all over the place. But each packet is kind of tagged and identified and then reassembled at your local computer so that it comes in a coherent way. So those are really important concepts for understanding the internet, but also cell technology works that way too. Your phone calls are split into packets and bundled the most efficient way to go through to the phone that's picking them up. Packet switching, really important throughout our current electronic media. Google Glass was well received by consumers. Ooh, okay, 6 got it right. It is false. So as we said, it currently is used in some manufacturing jobs where it's useful to have a screen and both hands available. But as what the hoped for consumer object, like an Apple Watch, the Google Glass did not work out well. Smart personal object technology is in. All right, 5 people got it right. No, 5 people got it wrong in PDAs. Sorry, I can't read this. Yeah. 1, the correct answer is it's in the Apple Watch. So spot technology in. We were talking about how important that's going to be for, where was this one?
What does it do, smart object?
It's basically, if you think of the metaphor of shaking hands, I mean, what this is, the spot technology is, it's the standard which says that this is how your watch is going to communicate with your phone, for instance. Or when you have wearable technology, which I don't have any of it, but let's say you've got, a particular shirt which monitors your body temperature, your heart rate, everything like that. Until each device can actually be autonomous and link to the cloud itself, your phone is going to be the kind of switch point between there. And so Spot is what determines, it's how the manufacturers, I want to go into business making smart sports shirts. How do I know how it's going to integrate with the iPhone or with Android? So that's what Spot is for. It's that standard which says, every shirt is going to work on this frequency and it's going to, communicate the data in this way. So that's what those are. Which company made the first PDA type of device? So remember, you should be thinking about what we learned, not just what you might have heard about. All right, that was better. Yep, so the Newton was the original PDA type device ahead of its time. Early users of the internet had to connect to the internet via modems or routers. 3 and 3. So no, it's true. You did have to connect to the internet via a modem. So question 6. Something is defined as machine-to-machine communications using cloud computing and networks. Right, that's good. The Internet of Things is correct. I was looking at that, I was thinking, wow, we dived so deeply into some of the consequences of the Internet of Things that I failed to come back and just use that particular type of definition. But that's, M2M, machine-to-machine communications. The idea of cloud computing being that, computer in your car or the computer, in your fridge or whatever, they're all going to be communicating with servers in the cloud, which is, where all of this data is going to be gathered and then, used either to restock your fridge or order the part that's broken in your car, or input to marketers who want to know what kinds of information you want to get about products and such, right? And then the networks of sensors are all integrated into your fridge, so it knows what's in the fridge, or into your car, so it knows what just broke, or into your home, so that it knows that you usually go to bed around 11 o'clock, so it should heat the room up starting at 10:30, or that you like to leave a light on, but you want it to go off at 2 in the morning, etc. So all of that, the sensors can be, picking some of that up, and it's smart enough to, currently, as you get in your car, it knows that on Saturday you usually go to that meeting, or on Sunday you go to church, and so maps will, first top of the list, will say, will propose that location. So those sensors are a key part of it. So, alrighty. Online audio does what? The mystery question. Allows listeners to hear almost any type of music, allows listeners to generate their own playlists, removes geographic restrictions imposed by traditional radio. I whisper into the microphone for the people who are streaming. The answer is all of the things, all of the above. There we go. Yes, all of the above. I was just reminded of something that I picked up reading those folks who were writing about radio and the competitive landscape that radio faces now was one of the prompts on the research paper assignment. And I generally found your answers very interesting regarding that. One thing I would say is there were a couple of people used an internet resource which blurred the lines between terrestrial radio and our current other forms of radio, which made it probably more difficult than it had to be for folks to argue about, the competition between these different radio sources. If I'm in the radio station business, Michael, could you guys, you're 3 minutes, you can talk outside, okay? So what I was just saying here is that, if you're in the radio business and you own a radio station in San Francisco, it's really, the way you think about radio is not that internet radio is part of what you do, or that, Spotify is just more of what you do, but in a slightly different way. In fact, these are competitors who, they're taking business away from you. So although it's cool for, scholars of radio and media history to kind of just lump all of it together and say, hey, it's just the delivery of music through different technology. But if you're in the business, it's really, that isn't the way you think at all. It's basically, I make my living because I have this license from the FCC, and I put out radio shows, and my audience has declined by 25% because of Spotify. So I see things very differently in that way. So it was just interesting to see that some internet article by the author's last name Wang had kind of made people's lives a little bit difficult on that question. OTT, what is OTT TV is getting audio video over the internet, bypassing cable providers. The other option, the law requiring cable companies to protect consumer data. Or the next one, cable satellite systems providing more than 500 channels. Or the use of facial recognition software. What is OTT? So the answer was red, getting audio video over the internet, bypassing cable providers. So, right? If I draw a picture of what the thing used to look like, there was your TV and there was a cable box, and the cable company sent all your programs through the cable box. When they talk about OTT, over the top, they mean your internet connection now going into the television goes over the top of the cable top box and goes directly into your television. So if you're Comcast, where you used to make a fortune because you were the only way that other programs could get onto a TV, now you don't like OTT, right? Because That brings Roku or all kinds of other multiple channel services into your television, and it cuts you out of the picture, or at least it cuts your table, your set-top box out of the picture, right? If your Comcast is like, I'm not making any money that way anymore, but thank goodness I charge inflated prices for the internet connection over which all these new channels come. So you're still protecting yourself that way. Sling TV is an example of which of the following: VoIP TV, place shifting, OTT, online banking app, or using the grid. Okay, well, 2 people got it right. So Sling is an example of place shifting and OTT. So the Sling service, as it began, was marketed as a way of, hey, you're a cable TV subscriber. Sling is another box that will send all of your cable channels over to your computer. So if you're on the road in a different city or something, you just log into your Sling account from your laptop, and you can get access to all of those cable channels that you're interested in. And now, as we've seen, so that would be place shifting, right? So that's what they mean by place shifting, is that you can watch TV in another place. And then they also had time shifting, which is where you can, TiVo a show and watch it at some other time, which is, being very difficult for broadcasters to actually accommodate. I see that we're already 1 minute late, so there's only a question or something, but we can do that question at the start of next class, and then we're going to go through all the other stuff as a review for the exam. So have a good weekend, and you know that this material, this page is up there available to you if you want to start reviewing on your own. That's the way to do it.